Hey, next up, we have Mr. Jim Schmelik. Sir, if you want to take the podium, thanks for driving all the way down from Cottonwood. And not to rush you, but 15, 20 minutes would be great, sir.
How about 4?
Schmelik.
Unless you guys ask questions.
Oh, yeah. And just state your name and who you represent.
Well, my name is Jim Schmelik, and good afternoon, Lieutenant Governor McGeachin and Representative Giddings and committee members. And thank you for inviting me down here to share my experience from the private side of education, which I've been involved with for quite a while in my life. I'll be brief and hopefully informative. I'll tell you a little bit about myself first. I live up in Cottonwood, Idaho. I've been married to my wife for 33 years. We have 8 children and 9 grandchildren. I'm self-employed, and we operate a small ranch where we grow hay, timber, and I manage other business interests. I have a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Maryland in Finance and Economics. I have served on 2 nonprofit school boards and currently serve as Vice Chairman of St. John Bosco Academy in Cottonwood, which is a small K through 12 private school. I currently also serve on that board as the, like I said, as the vice chairman now, and I have served as an elected official and chairman of the Idaho County Board of Commissioners in Idaho County. I've also helped many of our young children in our community prepare for confirmation, teaching them in the confirmation classes. St. John Bosco is accredited through an organization called Cognia, formerly called Advanced Ed, since 2007. And this accreditation certifies that we meet the state of Idaho education requirements for graduation in the state. And we're also accredited by the Western Catholic Education Association. St. John Bosco Academy was founded in 1993 with 3 simple philosophies: to teach the mind, to educate the heart, and to form the character. Our philosophy for education is not unique. Many schools and some universities utilize this method and follows the traditional classical education as outlined by Aristotle. It is historical in nature because history is important. G.J. Kesterton probably best summed it up best when he said, education is simply the soul of a society as it passes from one generation to the next. At St. John Bosco, the question for parents is how we wish to shape that soul and what is the legacy we wish to pass on. So here's a brief description of what we do. Classical education consists of many things, 2 major components, the trivium and the quadrivium. The trivium includes grammar, logic, and rhetoric. This is the root of modern language, art classes. The quadrivium includes arithmetic, music, astronomy, and geometry. This is the root of our modern math and sciences. All of this is presented to students in an exploratory fashion so they learn to appreciate the why of things and not just the what and the how. A teacher of classical education has as his or her ultimate goal to inform and form the students to become lifelong learners who know how to think and not just what to think. To arouse wonder, not just to memorize facts. To guide them on, not only to discover the truth of God and nature, but to understand who they are and what their purpose is. Who God is, who I am, and what my purpose is. Our mission statement is as follows. We work to form well-rounded Christian leaders, apostles convinced of the truth, who will teach their mark in shaping a new civilization of justice and love, and who will help spread the kingdom of Christ by taking their place as responsible and qualified leaders in the family, in the community, in the church, and in the world. We work to teach the mind, giving students a foundation in truth in all subjects so they can study, analyze, and build upon this foundation. Truth is the foundation of knowledge from which all other learning flows. We work to educate the heart, educating the student's heart and senses with a love for what is right, good, noble, just, and beautiful through the study of arts, literature, and Christianity. To form the character, encouraging and helping to form in each student a sense of responsibility, service to others, integrity in word and deed, perseverance, manners, and a practice of virtues. We strive to teach our students how to think. These simple elements allow for objectivity grounded in truth that is outside our being, it is internal to our human nature. It grounds us to recognize how small we are and yet how great they can be. This is what I've taught my children, and this is what we teach at St. John Bosco Academy. It is why my children are there. It is why the many families who attend St. John Bosco have their children there. Parent involvement within the school is vital to our success, and their recommendations build upon the foundations we have established. We are not perfect, and our motto, Excelsior, reminds everyone from the board, the staff, and the students, and the parents to reach ever higher and be the best we can be. It is a lifelong goal. I come before you as someone who cares for my family and those around me in building a community that passes on the greatness that lies in the wisdom of our founding. That has been my goal from the birth of my first child and our grandchildren and to all those I associate with. Much of my life has been dedicated to pass on to the next generation the lessons we have learned throughout our history as a world and as a nation. Learning from the mistakes of those who came before us and building upon their success to make our communities a better place is what we strive to do at St. John Bosco. Whether it's been educating my own children or preserving the ideals that make up a classical education on the boards I have served, passing on the wisdom that recognizes these gifts and talents of every individual is the goal of St. John Bosco Academy. And I'd stand for any questions.
Madam Chair and Mr. Schmelik, thank you for being with us today. Could you just describe the process of how you mentioned a great level of parental involvement. Can you describe to us that process? Do you have monthly meetings or quarterly meetings with parents to reevaluate the curriculum and the structure that you teach in your school?
So we have, textbooks do change. We mostly teach out of the classics, though. If we do use textbooks, and we do for math and some of our reading, we have a curriculum committee. That committee gets together and meets to update things. They make sure everything follows the mission of the school. Any textbooks we're going to bring in meet that criteria of the school. And then they bring that to the board. And they present it to the board, and we ask questions about it, and then we approve it or say go back to the drawing board. Because our job as the board is to protect the mission of the school. And so it's not we have committees, simply for dress code. We have uniforms. We had just a meeting last night to make a simple change, but it's something that we've got to be brought before the board. So we have committees, and they're all parent committees that bring things before the board. And even on the current board, we all have children in the school, except for one member who is an aunt, and she has a nephew in the school. So it's not complicated, but it's a lot of parental involvement. Parents have a lot of input, and it comes down to the final decisions being made by the board.
Mark?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll admit to you, sir, that one of your students is sitting right back here in the back of the room. If you happen to encounter a discussion, and she shared with me on the way down last night how they interact with the faculty and discuss current events and things like that. If a student was advocating for critical race theory type ideals, how do you suspect one of your teachers would address that?
They're going to tell them to go look at the facts. They're going to go tell them, do your research, and then come back and tell me what you find. I'll give you an example. So I was approached, and I just happened to be a history buff, and I'm in the school a lot, and the kids know me. All my kids have graduated from there. I have 2 left. And so when I was approached by the student, I said, I'm going to give you a few things to go look up. I want you to go look up the original draft of the Declaration of Independence. Then I'd like you to go look up the 3/5 part of the Constitution, and look what the debate was that took place over the 3/5 part of the Constitution. Then I'd like you to go look at the Northwest Ordinance and see what it says about what would happen in the territories prospective to slavery. Then I'd like you to go look up the 1794 States Act of Slavery and tell me what that did. Then I'd like you to go look up the 1806 Slave Importation Act and tell me what Congress was trying to do there. And then come back and tell me if maybe you've changed your mind on what you've been hearing. Because facts matter. And teaching them to go down these roads is critical today. No pun intended with what you're discussing here, using the word critical. But that's critical to getting these kids to think on their own. And facts are there. I stated earlier, history is important because it matters. And if we know our history, we'll know what this country was really formed on. It was to be founded in freedom and liberty that all would be free. And I hate to say this, but unfortunately, politics played a part in it. Politics will unfortunately always play a part of it. But I think we are always striving to move in the right direction. So that's how our teachers would handle that. And I talk to our teachers about this. I'm in the school a lot. I'm close to being retired now, so I get that opportunity. And our teachers think, they're critical thinkers. So they encourage students, okay, you've brought this to me, now go research it. Tell me what you can find. And they'll lead them like I just led them.
Thank you. Ryan?
Thank you, sir, for coming and visiting this day. Thank you for recognizing, Madam Chair. Your school being a private school, I assume there is some level of tuition required from parents in order for their students to attend. And of course, some people can afford that and others can't. And your school being a private Catholic school, that would be for some families and other families not. And of course, there are probably families in Idaho that actually want their kids to go to a school that teaches critical race theory. But right now, we have a system where the people who want critical race theory get it for free, and the people that don't want critical race theory have to pay for it, and that seems rather unfair. Can you think of a reason why our legislature should not treat these two groups of people equally, to where the people that don't want these things that are being pushed in the public school shouldn't be able to take their education dollars and go to a school that does not teach those things, and the people that do want critical race theory, well, they can take their education dollars where they want? Is there a reason why the legislature shouldn't treat all of these preferences equally?
It'd be a real simple solution with a tax credit, if that's what you're looking for. I'd love to see a tax credit back on that. I will tell you this, though, at St. John Bosco Academy, we do not turn away any students for lack of funds. We find a way to fund it. The other amazing thing about our little school, we've had about 5 families find us and move to the area from areas as far away as Nevada, California, Oregon, and Montana. We must be doing something right. But to your point, yeah, I would love to see a tax credit. And I'd love to see that more because that comes with no strings attached. I think vouchers has strings attached to it from the government. And I love our state of Idaho and I love our government here, but the less strings we have attached, the better off we are.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time. Have a safe drive home.
I can leave these if you'd like. But
Perfect. All right, we're down to the last item on the agenda. And Isaac, are you about ready to take okay. I will make, or do you want to clarify? Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify on the agenda that it is titled Idaho Superintendents. Going back, we had invited the Superintendents Association to present, and they were not prepared. And so we tried to limit it to anybody who is a superintendent. Now, Mr. Moffett is certified as a superintendent, but he is not going to speak on the perspective of a superintendent this morning, but rather as a current school administrator, and his subject of discussion today will be strengthening civics education. So thank you for being to present with us today, Isaac.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Committee. Just to reiterate, I represent no school district, no school, represent myself in my own capacity. All right, what I'm going to try to do, a little deviation here, and try to tie in both ends that we've heard about the state board and about curriculum into what's happening regarding teacher prep, standards, and social studies, and how we can improve. First of all, I think it's important to consider a couple statements that's been made in our past. This first one is from Nora Webster, our first American schoolmaster. The education of our youth is, in all governments, an object of the first consequence. The impressions received in early life usually form the character of individuals, a union of which forms the general character of the nation. Sorry, my slide said 1775. That should be 1875. In a textbook that I have sitting right over here that was taught in schools, public schools, which most college graduates could not pass the test that's in it, by the way. There is a list of maxims, political maxims that the author writes about. They're very important for us to consider today. For a moral and intelligent people, a Republican form of government is the best in the world. For an immoral and ignorant people, it is the worst. The Constitution of the United States should be carefully studied by every American citizen. Every citizen should be familiar with the Constitution of his state. In the United States, the ballots of ignorant voters are more to be dreaded than the muskets of foreign soldiers. Schoolhouses and schoolmasters are forts and garrisons to a republic. This is what was taught in our high schools more than 100 years ago. Russell Kirk writes in The American Cause regarding what was discovered during the Korean War, that many American troops who had been taken prisoner during the Korean War had been easy targets of communist indoctrination. In fact, the chief intelligence of the Chinese People's Volunteer Army in North Korea had written a memorandum to his superiors in Beijing, which he fairly gloated, quote, based on our observations of the American soldiers and their officers captured in this war, this intelligence officer wrote, the following facts are evidence. There is little knowledge or understanding, even among the United States University graduates, of the American political history and philosophy of federal government, our federal, state, and community organizations, and states' rights and civil rights, of the safeguards to freedom, and how these things supposedly operate within their own system. The disunioning of America. Page 23, the bonds of national cohesion are sufficiently fragile already. Public education should aim to strengthen those bonds, not weaken them. If separatist tendencies go unchecked, the result can only be their fragmentation, resegregation, and tribalization of American life. 1998. Has anything changed? A lot has changed in the last 100 and so years. We've been warned. The American people's been warned. This issue is an extremely complicated issue. It's not just one or two things. It's not just critical race theory. It's the new thing, new in the last 50 years, but it's come to the front now. But it's an ongoing fight that we've had in this country. In addition to many other issues or reasons we're seeing here, we have abandoned knowledge for skills. History, geography, and civics, among other essential knowledge that is the mark of an educated citizen, are severely weakened, if not ineffective altogether. We can look at any test given on civics education and know that to be, in fact, the truth. Political discourse has become so increasingly uninformed and vitriolic, and belief in political leadership has dramatically declined, and disagreement over policy is translated into demonization of others. We've gotten to a place where we don't even like one another anymore. There are serious groups in every state in our union who is discussing succession. Only an educated and patriotic citizenry who understand one another can reverse this impulse. Webster was dead right. We need a common intellectual currency. We talk about standards. We're going to get to that here in a minute. But let's talk about teacher prep, which I believe is one of our problems, one of many. But it's something the state board can do something about. Let's take a look at the University of Idaho teachers prep. So they have a couple different options to become a history teacher. If you don't want to get employed, then you will just major in secondary education and history. But we'll start with that because that is an option. And I say don't want to get employed because most school districts want you certified in a way that you can teach multiple subjects, and we will get you that certification in just a moment. But to do so, you need 45 credits in upper division history. Now keep in mind, most upper division credits, with very few exceptions, are 3 credits each. Now you could do a 30 credit for a minor in history and a 20 credit in 30 in a major and 20 in another subject area for a minor. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. So your first section up here, it is hard to read, but I can actually see it better up on this one than over there. But your typical survey classes, nothing wrong with those. But it's the next sections, your upper division. Select 3 credits of non-regional U.S. history course. Okay. 3 credits of Latin American history. Okay. That's, by the way, that's just one course. It's not specific on what course in this area. It could be, I'm being silly here, underwater basket weaving in Latin America. The history of it. That would count if it's a 300 level or above. Asian, African history. Again, nothing wrong with these. The problem is there's no depth. And you only need 1 in this area, in each of these areas. Go on next page. So let's say somebody wants to get a social studies endorsement. That's going to allow them to teach all the social sciences, which is about 7 core subjects in secondary ed. And for the committee, secondary would be considered 6th grade up through 12th grade, and that 6th grade is only if you're in middle or junior high. If it's in elementary and you're required to teach other subjects, you'd have to have a K-8 certification, which is an entirely different talk and even more problematic than this. So here we are, 56 credits from U of I you have to have. Typical start out, your core classes. Now let's take a look. Economics, you only need 6 credits. Here's the choices you get. Only 6, that means 2 of these classes. And yet now you're passing the exam, you will be certified to teach economics. Very little about capitalism. Very little about free market. In fact, I would argue, because I've taken 3 of these classes, that it's often not pro-capitalism, not pro-free market. Geography, 6 credits. That's only 2 classes, and now you're qualified to teach geography.
I think we're 1 slide behind.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
There you go, geography. You can take it from any of these areas, but again, if you're teaching world geography, climatology, really? How's that going to help you teach the kids how to identify the oceans and the continents and the countries and all of that? World regional geography is not going to be enough. Plus, that's a 200 level anyway. All right, let's take a look at political science. You only need 1. You're going to teach American government with just 1 upper division class. Not hardly qualified, I don't think. All right, and then, okay, upper division, 2 more classes there. Sorry, I got myself mixed up. All right, let's take a look at Boise State. Well, I'm only going to look at 2 universities here because they're all about the same. Typical, next one. Typical survey classes, and then they drop down to, you choose 2 courses from the following list. How about the history of love and war? That somehow is going to make you a better American history teacher. I don't disagree with necessarily some of these. In fact, I would argue you probably should take them all, to be honest with you. If you're going to be really in-depth in history, you probably should take them all. Let's see here. Oh, then this is going to go, yep, that page. 1 course from 2 distinct regions. So you take 1 from European, 1 from the Americas, and one, or you can take one non-Western history. Again, making you qualified to teach history. It seems to me that if you're going to teach American history and American government, shouldn't, in economics, particularly our form of free market, shouldn't we be experts in that field and not just really a jack of all trades? That's which is what they're attempting to do here. So this is one area that I believe needs to be looked at. By the way, Wyoming is the only state that requires all of their educators to take not only a Wyoming state constitution exam, but also the U.S. Constitution exam before they get their license. All teachers have to do that. There's nowhere in our requirements that even require any social studies, history, government teacher to learn anything about the Idaho Constitution. Nor is there anything in our textbooks. And that brings us to our standards. Now, I would have really, had I known there would have been so much English language issues today, I would have actually probably addressed that versus social studies. You can see where CRT and other things are moving in, how it's moving into the classroom. I'm going to explain how that's happening and how it's justified through standards. First of all, with social studies in Idaho, there are two sets of standards. You have your Common Core and you have your state content standards. Common Core focuses on skills, being able to, skills and general, what they call general critical thinking skills. And it's through social studies. I've got 3 different links there. We certainly can get the PowerPoint to you so you can go to these links where you can actually see these standards for yourself. Versus state content standards, that is focused on knowledge. Very different from Common Core. Most schools, most teachers are teaching strictly to Common Core, and it's taught not through social studies, but it's through language arts. It's a language arts focused, skills-based standards. For example, you won't necessarily see anything in Common Core that will say something like, identify the 4 liberty documents that gave birth to the Declaration of Independence. You won't see that in state standards anymore either, but you used to. I've tried to get the old standards. The new standards were revised in 2016, and conveniently, the state cannot find, as they've told me, they cannot find the old standards. The other subjects are archived, but these are not. So, for example, to understand the Declaration of Independence, when I teach it, I make sure students understand this was not, these ideals expressed in the Declaration was not something that these rich old white guys come up on their own. That it was an inheritance as being English. And to have this inheritance that was bought by their forefathers with blood, sweat, and tears, to have them violate it in such a way that the British was doing, was something they were not going to they weren't going to tolerate it. So you have to start with English history, all the way back, public school being what it is, you really need to start with the ancient Hebrews, but I typically start with William the Conqueror and how he brought in the common law, and then from that we get the 1100 Charter of Liberties. Most textbooks will mention the Magna Carta, but they missed a very important part. The Magna Carta starts out, and I'm paraphrasing, with all the other liberties associated in the previous document. I think they even name it the 1100 Charter of Rights or something like that. We're reclaiming those and the following, and there you get all the other provisions in the Magna Carta. So 1100 Charter of Liberties is a very important document that needs to be combined with the Magna Carta. After the Magna Carta, you get the Petition of Right, 1629, I think, if memory serves me right. And from that, we get the English Bill of Rights. Then we get to the colonial America, and we now take this extension of liberty, not the same as freedom. I make that very clear with my students. Not the same as freedom. Liberty is morality plus freedom. You get liberty. And that's very important to understand because in our declaration, it mentions two key things that we're not allowed to talk about in public school. Creator, capital C in our declaration, and God, capital G. We have to identify those two individuals because it doesn't matter whether you and I agree that these entities exist, these men did. And our declaration is based on those principles. And that's why I asked the lady about the textbook, about natural rights. I looked at a textbook once and I put it right back up after I showed my students. Natural rights, I'm paraphrasing, rights that existed before government. There is no power behind that. And it really makes the declaration worthless. Our natural rights come from a creator according to our founders. Our system does not work without that concept. Our liberty cannot be sustained without understanding that. We want another form of government? Fine. We don't want to believe that there's a creator, a divine being that has given us certain rights through the creation process? Fine. You better come up with a new constitution because our constitution allows us too much liberty. But you won't find that in our standards. You won't even hardly find primary sources in our standards. Let's take a look at some of these standards. We live in a constitutional republic. There's nothing more that makes me more upset than to hear a politician, news, or anyone else reference us as a democracy. I tell my students, you better pray to whoever you want to pray to, though you don't ever live in a democracy. We live in a republic, but in our state standards, a republic is mentioned 4 times K through 12 standards. 4 times. I'll give you a couple examples. I didn't put them all in here. I didn't believe there's any, you can look them up for yourself. 5th grade social studies is the first time it's mentioned. Oh, notice there, the goal, 4.4, build an understanding of the evolution of a democracy. The objectives. I don't know how you measure this, but objectives. By the end of 5th grade, students will be able to explain how the United States is a republic. Wait a minute, then why in the world is the democracy there? Because it never was. State the difference between direct democracy and constitutional republic of today's United States. That's not a bad goal, but it probably should be in maybe another standard in there. It's what's left out. It's what's leading kids to believe we're a democracy. It's leading them to a wrong conclusion. 6th to 9th grade world history and civilization. There we go. Build an understanding of the evolution of democracy. Standard 6-9. I won't read it. You can do it yourself. Analyze the various political influence that shaped civilizations, including city-state, monarchy, republic, non-state, and democracy. Great standard. Nothing wrong with that. And it's properly placed in world history. We're comparing and contrasting. Great. No problem there. 6th grade, U.S. History 1. Goal, build an understanding of the foundational principles of the American political system. Trace the development of our constitutional republic through the founding documents, colonial assemblies, and colonial rebellions. Here is where we get into a problem. It doesn't say which documents. It's not clear. It doesn't say how many. Most government teachers, history teachers, will address the Declaration of Independence, and what most students get out of it is no taxation without representation. It wasn't a tax document. It was a natural rights document. In fact, it only addresses financial issues, something like, 10 times, 15 times out of all of the complaints. It needs to be defined. This is left up to teachers. The problem is, as I've already shown, they don't have the depth coming out of college. They don't know it. I know so because I interview teachers to teach this subject, and they can't tell me Explain the Lockean time period of the American founding. Explain the Montesquieuan time period of the American founding. They have no idea. And yet they're going to teach this. Now, how many times is democracy going to turn, yeah, right there, mentioned? 24 times in our content standards. Just a sample, 4th grade, first time it shows up. Discuss the concepts of citizenship, popular sovereignty, respect for the individual, equality of opportunity, and personal liberty. That sounds much more appropriate under a Republican form of government than a democracy, because quite frankly, the mob doesn't care about any of this. History's proven that. How about History 1? Students will be able to describe the role of gender, race, ethnicity, religion, national origin on development of individual rights and political rights. On the surface, this is great. But it leaves it wide open for what we're discussing. We have to talk about race, but we have to talk about all of it. Truthfully, the best that we can as we understand it. Not with a motive to detach us from our heritage, from our roots. I've had students ask me, Mr. Moffitt, why don't we learn this in other classes? That's a good question, kids. History 2. So History 1 is typically taught in 10th grade, but it can be taught anywhere from 9th through 12th if you're a super senior. History 2, to trace the developments of expansion of political, civil, and economic rights. I have a tough time connecting that to the evolution of democracy. Again, why is this in U.S. history? We're not a democracy. It should, again, be back to republic. Trace the evolution of the American Republic would be more appropriate for a goal. Okay, how about American government? Notice the standard 4, students in American government build an understanding of the foundational principles of the American political system, the organization and formation of the American system of government, and that all people in the United States have rights and assume responsibilities, the evolution of democracy, and the understanding of comparative government. Goal 4.5, build an understanding of comparative government. Here's our objective: compare and contrast different forms of government, such as presidential with parliamentary, unitary with federal, dictatorship with democracy. No republic mentioned there. No republic. Again, if all they got to do is compare, put the republic in there, and we have a good goal. It's missing. How about another one? Analyze the struggles for the extension of civil rights. Okay? Again, we're not a democracy. Goal 4.4, we're back to somehow tying this into a democracy which does not exist here. Analyze and evaluate states' rights, disputes past and present. That's certainly important for a republic. We're in the middle of that right now with a whole bunch of federal issues. Provide examples of the role of leadership in changing relationships among the branches of government. Discuss how the interpretation and application of the United States Constitution has evolved. That in itself is categorically false. I just spent 2 days with federal judges, state judges, all the way up to the Idaho Supreme Court, including a Ninth Circuit District Court judge. They would argue it has not evolved. It is a competing interpretation that we're dealing with, not an evolvement. What this leads people to think is that we've gone from the originalist point of view to the living constitutional view. That there is other views. This is now the view, the living constitution view, and you can mold it and change it with the times without going through the due process of changing the law, and in particularly the Constitution. They made that very clear at this conference, that this statement is incorrect, that it's a competing view.
Isaac,
Now-
can you, which specific statement are you talking about?
The bottom one here, 4.4.4.
Thank you.
Yep. Now, I quickly, during break, read the Idaho Statesman's article this morning. And I have to admit, young people, you're right. And it's a shame they're not all here. We're committing educational or intellectual fraud on our kids. They are not being taught what they should be taught. They're being shortchanged. Now, not in the way they think they are, but they are. Our school system, again, this is a very complicated issue. I'm not trying to blame individuals. It's a system that has been basically wound up and turned loose to do what it does, to do what it naturally will do. We're seeing it cannibalize our society because our kids are not learning our first principles of the American constitutional republic. Period. In the statement, there is no dispute about it. That is what's happening in our education system. It starts with our, by the way, you want a shortcut to anybody listening to this who wants to get their social studies license, pass the national exam? All you got to do is study economics for dummies, world history for dummies, U.S. history for dummies. And in American, I'm not kidding you. You know what's in those 4 books and you will pass the exam. I've taken the exam. I know what's in it. That's all it takes. We are not teaching our teachers at an adequate level to understand what it is they need to be teaching. That's why our kids can't ask the questions, why are we not being taught? Because our teachers don't know it. And they're not about to expose that. I don't blame them. I wouldn't either. We've got to look at our teacher prep. We don't have time to get into the K-8 certification. That is, in my opinion, worse when it comes to social studies. And I hate that word. When it comes to civics, when it comes to history, geography. And by the way, these are the subjects that the kids are the first ones to get pulled out of when they need special help or additional help in their reading or their math, or if they're English language learners. They're not going to get these subjects. And yet, they're going to be voting. And yet they don't even understand our system. We can vote ourselves into socialism, but the only way out is to shoot your way out. Our students don't understand that. They don't understand. They don't even know what they don't know. They don't understand that more people have died in the last 100 years under communism in peacetime than all the wars combined. They don't understand that. And yet they're marching straight forward. They're marching to it. They don't get teachers who will look at the actual debate notes of the Constitutional Convention. Mr. Moffat, what do you think? It doesn't matter what I think. Let's see what Madison thinks. Let's see what Hamilton thinks. And we can open up the debate notes, because I have all 5 volumes, for us to examine and the kids to read for themselves. There's lots, our last meeting will discuss fixes, but I hope this kind of pulls in kind of what's already been talked about on both ends of how some of this is happening through these very vague statements. And again, had I realized we're going to be seeing so much English language arts, I would show you how there is no class. There's not requirement to read the classics anymore. You can read anything out there and meet the standards. I could do that in government. They're so vague, it's easy for me to take advantage. Let's put it that way. Take advantage and push whatever direction I want. And that's, in some cases, today we've seen those examples. And that's why I kept asking, standards, did they, because they can justify their position. All I got to do is meet the standards. This is how I'm addressing it. End of story. They are totally defended. But it's not what is best for kids. It's not best for the republic. We've got to get back to teaching real civics. We could start with that text, 1875 text. I'm telling you, I would not pass that book had I not did my own reading. They don't teach that anymore. And that's high school. That's 8th grade. Remember, high school used to end at 8th grade. That was it. That's all you needed. So, I'll stand for questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Isaac. I have some people telling me that Idaho Public Television may have turned the audio off on your presentation. So,
My
thank
voice
you.
do carry.
Thank you, Pam, for covering it. We'll make sure it has been on Facebook Live, and so there's probably links to that. So we'll make sure it was an excellent presentation. Okay, any questions from the committee? Okay, Mark.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Madam Chair. As you were chatting, I shot one of the superintendents up there in Nez Perce, the Nez Perce School District Superintendent, and he commented, and that's where we live. And again, I'll say it's a great little school. So they teach. He said they give the there's a standard 100 question U.S. citizenship test, but it's different around the state. So that's something I look forward to following up with him to click into and learn more about that. And then he did say 8th grade, they get U.S. history, 11th, U.S. history, and 12th government. So I suspect there's, and I said this last session, I think there's some schools out there that are probably doing this well. And so I've communicated to, I've invited discussion with most of the superintendents up there in our neck of the woods in District 6 and 7, and I look forward to chatting with them. I hope they engage because I'd like to learn more about this particular topic. Thank you very much.
So one of the things I would ask them, if they think they're doing well, ask them based on what standard?
Sure. No, I understand that.
What measuring stick are they using? The other, and the citizenship exam is required in Idaho, but there is no requirement to pass by 100%, like a citizen or a nationalized citizen would have to. Some schools at 60%, some at 70%. There's also no requirement that they take all 100 questions. So everybody does it a little differently, but my position, and I've had students who were working on their citizenship exam for real, and they're like, why does this guy only have to pass 70%, and in 2 weeks I got to pass with 100%? You've been in this country going to school for 12 years. I've been here for 3. He's got a great point. Why do we have such low standards for our kids? I don't understand that. One more point about the low standards. About 10 years ago, there was a survey done by an NGO for the state, and they asked teachers, do you think your curriculum or what you teach is rigorous enough? And 75% said yes. They asked their students, do you think your curriculum is rigorous enough? 75% said no. That's why I always caution when somebody tells me, oh, I think it's good. My curriculum is worthwhile. Well, really? What would your kids say?
Well, I guess my point is that I asked the question, and I'm happy he answered. Their requirement is 80% to graduate. So it's really that simple, and we can, we'll discuss that further, I hope. But that was, in fact, the standard there.
That's good to hear that it's 80%. Yeah. Better.
Coach.
Madam Chair, I appreciate your passion for this. As a foreigner coming from another country, some of those ideologies were so helpful for me to understand the freedoms we have and where I came out of. I came out of Austria, which was unlimited opportunities, to America, with unlimited opportunities. And I just appreciate valuing the effect of learning what the information is and not jumping to conclusions. So I really appreciate that, and I'd have further discussion on that. But I thank you very much for that. God bless you.
Excellent, thank you. All right, committee, only 5 minutes over. You did have your minutes in your packet. in reviewing them, we found a couple of mistakes, and so we would like to update those, and I'll request that we have a motion to approve those on the next meeting. Okay? Oh, no, that's okay. Well, the next meeting, we will work on that. Okay, I want to open it up just the last few minutes. Any committee discussion? I know there was the comment earlier about sending a letter to the State Board of Education. They did do a public response during the committee. I forwarded it to you. Do we want to maybe entertain a motion for something like that? No, sorry. Just earlier, Ms. Miller had talked about requesting the task force write up a letter and everybody sign on inviting the state board to attend our next task force meeting.
Madam Chair, so moved.
Okay, great. We have a second. Okay, all those in favor? And all those opposed? Sure, if you want to go to your microphone. Okay, the motion is passed, and we have a question.
Is the purpose of sitting on the committee or standing for questions, or what would be the purpose of the letter and the invitation?
Okay. Any discussion? I think overall would be for them to maybe provide a presentation and be available for questions. Yes. Okay. Okay. Great. All right. Any other topics the committee wants to discuss? Next meeting, we're going to be focused on higher education here in Idaho. And we will also open it up and invite maybe some of our institutions of higher learning, and we'll work on that agenda during the interim. A lot of great information here. I'm going to turn it over for any closing remarks by the Lieutenant Governor if there are no other questions from the committee. One over here from Laura. Microphone.
For the next meeting, you have Trevor Loudon on the agenda.
We were going to let you make that special announcement, Laura. So for our next meeting, which will focus on higher ed, if you want to go ahead and share with the committee your effort to bring him to present to us in next month.
Okay. Well, so I remember it being asked, I don't know, I just heard Representative Giddings say if anybody has any suggestions for speakers. So I'm sitting in bed a couple nights later, I'm going, oh, Trevor Loudon, he'd be awesome. And so I just texted him, and anyway, he said, yeah, I'd love to come. And so I said, oh my gosh, he's answering me. And so anyway, he's on his own dime flying to Idaho to talk to us because he thinks it's that important, and he really applauds our efforts and appreciates what you're doing, what we're doing.
Well, thank you for making that initiative and for your support to help bring him to Idaho, and we'll be really anxious and looking forward to hearing from him. Yeah. Any other comments from anybody? So let me thank all of you for your time today. Thank you to all the members of the public who spoke and presented. I think today was a great discussion where we're starting to understand what's in policy and statute and what is not there and what we can do. And I would ask that each of you as committee members start being prepared for coming next month, and then for sure the month after that, with some solid ideas of what we could formally consider as a committee to make as a some formal recommendations. So if you would do that, and we'll review the minutes next month, the 2. And I wanted to give, in addition to all the committee members for your time and members of the public, want a special thank you to Piercy for being our secretary today and taking minutes. Thank you to Brooke for the research that you did and presented to us. And a thank you to Jordan, my chief of staff, for ordering lunch for us all today. So thanks again for your hard work and your commitment. Really appreciate your effort. And with that, we will entertain a motion to adjourn. A motion has been made to adjourn and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. And the committee is adjourned.
Idaho in Session is brought to you by Union Pacific Foundation, Boise State University School of Public Service, Idaho State Broadcasters Association, Idaho Cable Broadband Association, Association of Idaho Cities, University of Idaho James A. and Louise McClure Center for Public Policy Research. Additional funding provided by the Friends of Idaho Public Television Endowment.